Hello, Greg. How are you?
Hey, yes, I'm very, very well. You?
Yes, good. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me at our chat today about how councils can improve the citizen engagement through proactive outreach. I really look forward to this. But before we get into it, Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll talk to you, just from an Oracle perspective. So I represent Oracle Marketing Cloud for nationally, so for specifically for public sector, which constitutes at a state level and then at a council level, and then also specifically for the higher education market.
Oh, super interesting. Two industries which I personally am quite passionate about. But public sector, why do you enjoy working with councils and helping them make a difference for specifically from marketing and digital engagement?
Well, I think it's an area that is still in growth mode. I still think that there's significant amount of opportunity to help councils develop a stronger strategy, not just in marketing solutions, but in terms of how they engage with their residents. And as obviously being a resident of a council myself, then you sort of see some of the things that perhaps could be done better through smarter technology or better management of data. And it's always nice and rewarding, I suppose, when you get to deliver that as a salesperson, and see that bear fruit in something, whether it be your council or see it in some of the case studies that Oracle's been working on. And since coming back to Oracle, seeing some of the councils that have come on board, and some of the conversations that we're having at the moment is pretty exciting. So that's really the key motivator.
Perfect. I love it. It's a perfect segue into my first question, Craig. So technology and councils, technology for customer experience in councils and, the pressures councils experience at the moment. What do you think are some sort of the external and internal factors and trends and pressures councils have to deal with today?
Yeah, so having come back on board, I mean, we see it a lot. And one of my previous companies, we saw fair traction with some of our competitors, with the Tech One dominance, I suppose, in the Australian market. But for whatever reason, that still hasn't translated necessarily into that data and that customer or resident 360, which is really that sort of panacea that we think that, and we're seeing now that the councils are really aspiring towards. And so what I would probably suggest is, I mean, that one of our key case studies that we have here at Oracle that I've been working with, which is Sunshine City Council, really started to talk around some of the things that leaders within councils nationally are starting to do, and that could start at things like Our Council or Smart Council or Smart Citizen or whatever the case may be. But really, what that means is that you're starting to think a little differently about how you manage your data and starting to unify those applications rather than having what we've seen a lot of is that, yes, you've got your ERP, your financials, your HR, and some of those core applications starting to talk to one another. There's still a huge disconnect between some of those isolated systems, such as marketing and maybe HR, which are really sort of the bedrock of how you start to communicate with your residents. And that being isolated really means that you've got a real disconnect and the inability to connect with your customers on that sort of one-to-one basis. And really all you're doing is being able to spam and blast and batch and blast to those residents. And so what we would say really as a phase one is making sure that everything starts to sing and is united and is working in unison, and that you have the ability to have your CRM, have your ERP, have your financials, have that golden record, dare I say, of that resident, but then your marketing solution or enterprise marketing solution, rather than maybe just a batch and blast type system, is embedded within that, and you can start to collect that data on your residents, and then suddenly you've got a real core basis of the right solutions in place, and then begin that sort of really sophisticated strategy in how you talk to your residents.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, right? Yeah, and I think specifically for councils, I mean, having worked with councils over the years now as well, I think the power of connected data means not only being able to understand your audience better, yeah, but also allows automation in the back end, which in turn results to cost saving, faster turnaround times, more efficient dealing with citizen complaints or requests, and so forth. So I fully agree. I think having a solution stack which is integrated, so front end with back end with sort of the golden customer record, is absolutely key. And with that, I want to ask another question, Greg. What's your point of view of integration of second or third party data? Because as a council, you have your sort of your, whatever you know about your citizens, but what about, I'm just making this up now, but, public transport use, or I don't know, like any other, like sports clubs or schools, or, like to really create a bit more holistic picture of your citizens. Do you think there's something in it?
I do. I think I dare I say, I think that councils have got a bit of a journey to go on before that becomes prevalent. I think you've almost got that could almost come as a fourth step. I know that we were going to talk about 3 steps today, but it's definitely got to come into practice because, and I think just going back a touch, you've almost got 2 strands here, right? You've got councils need to have disseminate that they've got essentially 2 markets. They've got their resident market where councils need to collect that data. And we talk, again, the Sunshine City Council is a really great example of that. 300,000 contacts, so a sort of very common amount of contacts and residents that many of the councils listening today would be able to be dealing with. Getting that house in order, understanding them, making sure that they have the ability to collect that data, but then also, and that might sit within like a service system, for example. So as and when that resident might phone up and say, hey, listen, I want to do some waste collection or I want to pay my rates or whatever it is, whatever interaction that is with that council, that initial data or those little footprints that customer has or that resident has with the council begins to build a profile that is stored and tracked, again, rather than what we're seeing a lot in council at the moment is that any interaction that happens from a marketing perspective really isn't captured all that well. You've got that piece, and then you've got the other piece, which might be a CRM, where you've got a council actually engaging with a business piece. So you've then got direct contact with local businesses. It could be barbers, it could be the IGAs, it could be whatever it is, where, again, the council needs to have that direct communication from a business perspective. And then those 2 pieces of data can then cross-pollinate, where you can start to bring the resident and business world together with the council orchestrating that that data flow, if that makes sense. So I don't think first party, second party, third party data, definitely, but I think if we go down this phase 1, data capture, integrating, understanding, having the platforms unified is certainly the first piece. I think that whole DMP or cookieless piece, where you then got to understand about predictive technologies around resident behavior, is probably a 4th, 5th step, I would say.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. And let's assume, okay, as a council, right, if we say that the first step is really, okay, well, I'll do the data collection properly and make sure the systems are integrated within, right? So you can automate, you can use sort of add-ons like chatbots or apps which sort of process any citizens' requests or snap, send, solve kind of things. So then the next step, I'm assuming, is learning more about your citizens, sort of the progressive profiling to move beyond just sending the next rate updates or the next street plans or development plans out to the entire community.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's again twofold. So many councils will have already done some great work, and I'm sure there's many mobile applications already in place with many of the councils that would listen today or would see this. So that's a big tick. So that's great that technology is already established. However, the issue is that when a resident comes and engages with that application or that website and might be struggling or just completes that action, then that might just be it. And then they disappear and, you're none the wiser as to why they came, what they did they struggle, did they complete it? It's just disappeared. Whereas what we're suggesting is that, look, you've got this amazing facility as your website or your service center or your mobile application. And that could be, again, it could be phase one. It could be a waste registration. It could be a complaint. It could be a damaged street sign that they've seen that they want to send out a mobile work order for, or it could be your rates notification is a really basic one. And as somebody starts to interact with that on the website, if they were struggling, say in real time, and you can manage that individual and see that individual on your site and they can't complete that pet registration or whatever, that might be able to send an automatic notification to an email marketing solution, or it could send to your service center on the fly to allow someone to engage with that customer or that resident that you know a little bit of information on, and say, hey, listen, Greg, can see you on the site at the moment, can see that you struggled getting that pet registration. We're going to get Jane from the service center to give you a call in 5 minutes and just see whether we can help you through that. Starts to mean that you're rather than this sort of reactive or not even reactive at all, is that whilst people are interacting with the council, that you have an eye on that and that you have that one-to-one relationship. So that's a support perspective. But equally, as you're doing that, maybe as a follow-up, that could send out an automatic campaign to those residents or those people that have engaged via those different channels and say, hey, listen, just wanted to get some idea as to, is that your preference as to how you'd be preferred to be communicated by the council? Are there any other services that we could assist you with, right? And so you start to get a profile that you can build up. And again, all of this starts to be stored, and that starts to feed the way that you then have your communication strategy with different pockets of those residents within that 300,000, for example. And that means it's not necessarily a monetary thing, but it's more of okay, how can we speed up our own internal processes, which reduces cost? How can we close off jobs quicker? How can we get rates paid quicker? Whatever the metrics are for said council, that's going to allow that sort of time to value to be realized really, really quick by just a collection of data from those residents.
Yeah, I loved it because I think, I think probably, I don't know who's listening at this call at this point in time and who's looking at this after the recording is done, but knowing yourself, sometimes, it's hard to find your way through a website or to complete something where you're looking for a detail which you can't find at the point in time. And I think for any organization, councils, or councils, I think it's a really powerful thing to be able to proactively pick it up and create an outreach campaign where you can say, hey, we've seen that you've struggled with this. We've seen that you couldn't, you got stuck at this point. Let us help you. Yeah.
Yeah, massively. And, I was trying to get, when I spoke to the case study before this call, just understanding what drives the council to care. There is that resident nurturing, which is important, but there is the time aspect, and time obviously going to equate to money from a council perspective. That money can be freed up to further invest in the community and all that sort of good stuff. So these solutions are sort of threefold. Better resident engagement, means a happier community. The council is going to be able to streamline its processes and then also be able to use that information that's collected on its residents to help fuel the local business community as well. So everybody sort of flourishes by starting to address this, which is really as simple as just making sure that data from that you've already captured, you already own, is actually nurtured and utilized properly, rather than, again, just sitting there in a channel to go, hey, I think we really should send out an email this week, without any sort of real understanding as to why you're doing it. Having that connected to the wider systems is super important, and can make an immediate impact. So this isn't something where you go, oh my God, we're going to have to make this huge investment. This can be done relatively easily with either maybe one tool or some basic integration. Some discussions with consultants like yourself, Anita, in terms of just helping them understand what those first 2 or 3 steps are. And obviously Oracle has an abundance of case studies, and certainly from my world, from a marketing perspective, we have a couple of case studies, but where some of these thought leaders within councils are starting to head towards.
Yeah, I love it. And, you know, while you're talking, I've also been thinking of simple things like a preference center. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where if I'm a member in a specific district, you know, I could say, well, I want to be informed about all those things. These are the sports I'm interested. That's like of the events I'm interested. That's what I want to be updated of.
Yeah.
That's the channels I'd like to be spoken to or communicated to. You know, and it's not sort of dispatch and blast for all, but really you can drive this sort of sense of belonging and community engagement and community involvement, which I certainly do think is the intent of councils to create that sort of feel, which leads me to the next point. Yeah, and you know, I've been discussing this quite a bit.
Yeah.
Loyalty programs for councils. Yeah,
Yes.
of you know, having the idea and the concept of rewarding good behavior with some sort of point system or tier system, celebrating the people who actually get involved, of doing the right thing, to, you know, getting the businesses involved who could, you know, say, oh yeah, if you reach 100 points, you know, you
Yeah.
get a free pot with your Parma next Friday night in our pub, or, you know, so sort of that philosophy. I'm not aware that anyone does that, any councils in Australia do that at this point in time, but I'd love to debate that over the next 10 minutes with you a little bit around
Yes.
what you think that could look
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, and you know, and again, this sort of goes back to your first point as to why you bother, and certainly from a salesperson, there's a
Yeah.
motivation to see things change, I suppose, and certainly within the council world, seeing something like a loyalty program, and not just doing it for the sake, but actually doing it and seeing it thrive would be a personal win for me. So just to touch on loyalty in terms of where other people may have seen it, and I'm sure they do. I don't know if, especially within COVID times, the loyalty programs for people like Dan Murphy's or Coles or Flybys or Qantas Points, they're all loyalty programs which, you know, originated actually with airlines back in the 1970s, and you know, a fundamental way that we live and engage with brands, but particularly just from a retail perspective, typically. But Oracle's just recently acquired a company called CrowdTwist. Take a look at it. It's Gartner market leader in the Magic Quadrant. It's not the point of actually positioning a sell here or a product, but just to, you know, take a look. The concept really is, could that be transferable to a council world? And I certainly think it could. And if anybody's interested, I'd love to sort of debate it in terms of how that might come to fruition. And one of the ideas that we were thinking about is that, again, let's say 300,000 residents, just nipping back to phase two. Phase two would be a collection of data where you understand, you know, profiling, if you like, or this progressive profiling of your residents, which might be, yes, they've got 20% interested in sports, 10% interested in volunteer activities, clean up the beach, whatever it is, or, you know, better waste management, or what are the things that people care about within the community to make it flourish, right? Once you've got that, so this is again, it's 1, 2, 3, then potentially a loyalty program could be put in place. I think that you could have where you would encourage people to embark on a volunteer program, for example, where it might be, you know, for a street cleanup. You know, you register it, it gets registered in the system or in the CrowdTwist solution, for example. You're a resident, that would sync back through to your service cloud or your resident record and be able to store a point scoring system. And it might be Greg Johnson has done a street cleanup, he's attended a triathlon, or he's volunteered for a local barbecue at the local surf club, whatever it might be. And that's accumulated 50 points, something like that. And imagine doing that at a scale where you've got, say, 200,000-300,000 people doing some kind of thing, you know, big or small, lots or indifferent, whatever it might be. And then so you have this multitude of different points across your resident portfolio. And then what you might want to ask is then say, okay, what do we do with those points? How do they redeem those? You know, who's going to care? And I think you and I spoke about it, Anita. It's like we were originally saying, okay, well, do you get discounts off your rates? You know, and maybe that, I don't know whether that's practical. It certainly could be something that you could look at. But what we were talking about, and I think would actually work, is allowing those points to sort of be transferred into a sort of voucher scheme or a discounting scheme that could be reworked back into the community. So those points could be celebrated with community businesses, not the Coles or the Woolies or the big multinationals of this world, but smaller businesses where, like you said, you could say, okay, well, you can redeem those 10 points, which equates to $20, and that can be spent in your local spud shed or whatever it is, whatever local business have signed up. And I think that being able to redeem those loyalty points in such a way, again, allows the inner community of your council to work as one. And again, that goes back to the data thing. It's this whole unity, working in unison, that is orchestrated by the council, but to the best effect of the residents and the businesses. In addition to that, what that means is that you then have a reason to talk to both residents with something actually interesting to say, rather than saying, here's your rates notice. Yes, I can pick your bin up next Tuesday. We've got something meaningful to communicate to our residents in a one-to-one basis of stuff that they're interested in, because you've already collected that data in that phase 2 process, and allow that to disseminate to your local businesses where they know that those residents are going to be shopping or spending those and redeeming those loyalty points within their store. So it all starts to create this amazing ecosystem on the basis of doing something relatively straightforward.
Yeah, look, I absolutely love that idea, right? And I think, Greg, you really summarized it up beautifully with your full circle explanation. And I'm a big believer, people genuinely care. People genuinely want to contribute, specifically if it's for the local community, right? And if there's some sort of reward system, and I don't think it's the value of the reward more than the recognition and the fun of being involved and being somewhere on a leaderboard. And I can see the geeks getting heavily involved and doing the rubbish collection on the beach every other weekend because they want to get high up in the leaderboard and having a fun and meaningful way of engagement. And I think you're spot on, right? The connection back to the local businesses, I think, creates this powerful ecosystem, right? It may, if like, oh my God, I've earned 100 points because I've done, 3 things which help the local community. And now I'm like, oh, there's all these shops or services I never knew even existed, right? Like some, I don't know, local arts and craft shop or some sort of service, which I can then choose to get a discount of a product or service that otherwise probably wouldn't have chosen or discovered, right? Because
and people are already doing it. They're already doing it. So this isn't a new idea. It's just a new way of delivering that idea en masse, which, the council should be the hub of. So, for example, my son has just done he's created 20 meals, he's cooked them at home, and then then they're distributed out to the homeless shelter, which again sits in our local council. That potentially, for example, could have earned him 20 points, right? It's not a monetary thing. So you're not getting things confused with doing things for money. You're still doing it for the love of doing it and doing it because that's the right thing to be doing in your community. But equally, the council can reward you without it seeming crass or whatever. And it can, rather than it just being somebody going, oh, I think I should do some good. The council sort of orchestrating that, as I said earlier, I think is a really good way of managing it. And then being able to see where you sit within that pecking order, or the council then being able to communicate the impact of that. Sometimes people can get involved in volunteer programs. They might even give blood or whatever they might be doing, and they don't actually see the fruits of their labor. And sometimes I think the council could do that, and again, collecting that, say, hey, listen, FYI, that beach cleanup that you 300 people did and earned 20 points for the other day, all of that plastic has then gone to here, and this has made this park bench, which is now sitting in the council, whatever it is. There's a story behind some of the efforts that you're doing, and it's just way more interesting. I would hope that people would agree, that you would agree, Anita. It's way more interesting than just talking about when your bin's going to get collected.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it creates that sense of belonging and meaningful engagement, right?
Yes.
Like, if you know that your council knows that you're doing the beach cleanup once a Saturday, one month, one weekend a month or something, or you're volunteering at the local footy club and you're training the preschoolers to become, how to kick a ball because you're passionate about doing something for the kids. Well, whatever it is, right? I think so many people give and volunteer and invest in their local community without usually any recognition other than the people around them. And so I think having some sort of formal process behind it to really, connect people, but also create a platform for people who are naturally maybe introverts to be able to come out of the shell and get involved, or socially disadvantaged, or
the main thank you, Peter. The other thing as well is, I think sometimes that introvert piece, if you know more about your residents, and again, let's go back to phase one: data, profiling, ability to engage on this one-to-one piece. If you understood someone saying, hey, listen, I'd love to volunteer, but I really don't know where I start, that then might be something that you have a pot of people where you can engage and suggest and proactively promote some certain events that ordinarily those people may not have thought about. And I think that that's another aspect. Whereas there may be some people that go, hey, listen, I'm already doing some stuff. I've picked these, and they upload it onto their loyalty program or something like that. And so they're very proactive. Whereas some of the introverted individuals might be like, hey, I could really do with a couple of suggestions, but I'd love to get involved. And again, it's I think it's a really strong way of bringing people out of their shells, and with that, and again, I don't want to talk monetary side of things. I know we're short on time, but just a really positive community, a really positive council has huge impacts in terms of house rates and house prices, and just the way that you feel about within that community. So I would love to see it. So if there's anyone on this call that would love to thrash out some ideas, we have some specialists that are dealing with the major brands globally. But I think that there's a definite transferable outcome that we could apply to the council world.
Yeah, I agree. And Peter has a question here, and I'd love to see my local council adopt it. And what's the barrier? Is it budget?
No, I don't know. I don't think it is budget. We've got. I just don't think. I think it's just where people are at within their journey, and I think that there are many councils that are starting to get some of these things bang on, and I think like we said, the loyalty is probably a phase 3, and it falls a little bit down the pecking order, but I just think that I don't think it is I don't think it is a budget thing. I think it's just maturity. I think it could be where does this fit within, Greg? We've got a ton of stuff that we've got to integrate in the next 12 months. And then suddenly this sort of corporate social responsibility type ideas sort of falls to the wayside a little bit. But in actual fact, it probably should be front and center, and almost work backwards from that to say, okay, well, look, guys, we're going to do this, and what are the steps we need to do in order to get there? So it's maybe a different type of thinking. But I definitely don't think, given I've seen the amount that is spent on the likes of, say, a Tech One or these unified one council systems, a loyalty program system is pretty insignificant in comparison.
Yeah. No, that would have been my guess as well. It's a guess. And I think it's also, knowing how to tackle this. I think, the whole customer engagement and digital experience and whatnot is still somewhat a bit maybe daunting for some councils and leaders out there, which, and of course lots has changed over the years, but I realize we are almost out of time. So to conclude the discussion, I'd say, if anyone who's listening to this would like to sit down with us on a virtual coffee or an actual coffee, Greg is in Melbourne in a few weeks, or
yes,
you're usually over in Perth, we're happy to debate this further, because that's just also just a debate and a concept from us, and we'd love to see this happen actually in action somewhere in Australia, and we'd work with a council. We'd love to work on a council on it to actually make this reality.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for your time. Talk soon.
See ya.